Wittgenstein's Language Games Explained. The towering intellectual figure of Ludwig Wittgenstein delivered not one, but two seismic shifts to 20th century philosophy. While his early work, the Tractatus Logo Philosophicus, attempted to establish a rigid, crystalline structure for language, a picture theory where words strictly mapped onto facts in the world, it was his later, more sprawling masterpiece, the Philosophical Investigations, that introduced a concept far more fluid, human, and ultimately revolutionary: language games. This is not a formal theory in the classic sense. It's an illumination, a diagnostic tool designed to cure the philosophical maladies that arise when we mistakenly believe all words function like names or labels for fixed entities. The shift from crystal to mess. Wittgenstein's realization was that the rigid, logical model of the Tractatus was a beautiful cage, an intellectual ideal that failed to account for the actual, lived experience of communication. Actual human language, the language we live in, is not a flawless mechanism for mirroring reality. It is a jumble of overlapping activities. He famously urged us to look and see, to observe how language is actually used in the rough ground of everyday life, rather than constructing an ideal, abstract logic for it. The term language game, Sprachspiel, is employed to underscore two vital ideas simultaneously. Firstly, that speaking a language is an activity or a form of life, like a job, a ritual, or a sport. And secondly, that the meaning of a word is defined by its rules of use within that specific context, just as the rules of chess define the move of a rook. Crucially, the simple examples he provided, such as the builders communicating with words like slab or pillar, were not meant to be complete theories of language. They were objects of comparison, primitive models designed to highlight that a word's meaning rests entirely on the practice it enables. Meaning as use, not reference. The traditional Augustinian view of language holds that words are names, and meaning is the object or entity a word points to. Wittgenstein dismantles this foundation. For him, the meaning of a word is its use in the language. Consider a seemingly simple word like read. We use it in countless ways. She is reading a novel. I can read the time on the clock. The pressure gauge reads 100 psi. I can read his mood. If you try to find the single, universal mental process or external object that all these uses share, you will be frustrated. The word does not possess a singular essence. It is an instrument with different functions in different language games. The criteria for correctly using read in the context of a novelist are distinct from those in the context of a pressure gauge. This realization liberates us from the philosophical compulsion to seek hidden mental or metaphysical reference for every word, replacing it instead with a description of the practice we engage in when we utter it. The family resemblance of games. If language games are so diverse and context-dependent, how do we group them under a single heading? Here, Wittgenstein introduces the profound concept of family resemblance. He asks us to consider the word game itself. Think of card games, poker, solitaire, board games, chess, Monopoly, ball games, soccer, tennis, and children's games, tag, peekaboo. Can you isolate one singular, necessary, and sufficient feature common to all of them? The answer is no. They are not unified by an Aristotelian essence. Instead, they are related by a complex network of overlapping and crisscrossing similarities, like the resemblances between members of a family. One has the same nose as the father, Another has the same gait as the mother. A third has the same temperament as the aunt. There is no singular game essence, and likewise, there is no singular universal structure to language. The various language games, such as asking a question, expressing sorrow, describing an emotion, or making a joke, are all connected through this intricate web of resemblances, not by a single abstract logical form. Forms of life and the rock bottom of practice. The language games are not played in an abstract realm. They are always embedded in what Wittgenstein called a form of life, Lebensform. This concept is perhaps the most difficult to pin down, yet it is essential. It is the pre-linguistic, cultural, and behavioral backdrop against which our linguistic practices make sense. It encompasses our shared human nature, our biological realities, like pain and sight, and our cultural habits, the shared way we act, feel, and organize ourselves in the world. It is the unjustified but acted upon foundation of our linguistic practices. When we learn a language game, we are not just learning syntax, we are internalizing a form of life. For instance, the language game of certainty, example asserting "this is a tree," is rooted in a form of life where we simply act on this shared knowledge. We do not doubt the existence of external objects as a constant philosophical exercise. The form of life is where justification ends. It is the primitive bedrock of our language and action beyond which we can only describe, not argue. The private language argument, a unique application. One of the most famous and unique applications of the language games concept is the private language argument. This addresses the profound philosophical temptation to treat inner sensations, pain, thought, feeling, as private inner objects named by private words. A private language would be one whose terms refer to sensations known only to the speaker, and are therefore inaccessible to others. Wittgenstein argues that such a language is fundamentally impossible, because it lacks a criterion for correctness. In any language game, the use of a word must be publicly checkable or, at the very least, governed by a public rule. If I invent a sign S for a sensation I have, how do I know the next time I use S that it refers to the same sensation? Since the sensation is private, there is no independent external rule, memory check, or public practice to anchor its meaning. The sensation cannot be the rule itself, because any private rule I decide upon would only seem right to me. Consequently, the word pain does not derive its meaning from a private object, the pain sensation, but from the public language game of pain behavior, wincing, crying out, sympathetic responses, and shared medical contexts. The language game gives the sensation its legitimate, communicable, linguistic home. Philosophy as therapy. Ultimately, Wittgenstein saw his later philosophy not as an effort to construct grand new theories about reality, but as a form of therapy. He argued that philosophical problems are not substantive problems about the world, but rather grammatical bewilderments. They arise when language, which is perfectly functional in its everyday context, is pulled out of its game and starts to idle. We take words like knowledge, truth, or consciousness and expect them to reveal some grand, universal hidden essence that lies outside all concrete linguistic practices. By meticulously showing us how language actually works, by mapping the various language games and their rules, Wittgenstein's method is designed to lead the philosopher back to the rough ground of ordinary use. His goal was not to solve the deep philosophical problems, but to dissolve them, by revealing their source as grammatical confusion, to show the fly, the philosopher, the way out of the fly bottle, the philosophical conundrum, by examining the misleading structure of the glass itself. His legacy is a profound call for intellectual humility, urging us to stop searching for one monolithic linguistic system and instead to appreciate the teeming, contextual richness of our actual, messy, and profoundly human linguistic practices. We've unpacked a dense, revolutionary idea here, revealing how our words are defined not by rigid logic, but by the social fields we play them on. If this deep dive into the grammar of our shared life resonated with your own intellectual curiosities, don't just let the insights evaporate. Engage with this conversation. Drop your most challenging philosophical question about language below. Let the comments section become its own vibrant language game. If you value this journey into the profound corners of thought, consider subscribing to keep your mind well-fed with more original explorations. And finally, if this explanation helped untangle the knot of private language or clarified the